Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sleep Space. Tonight, we will talk about a question that stretches the limits of imagination and logic at the same time. Can the universe exist without time? It's one of those questions that sounds simple when you first hear it, but the more you think about it, the more your brain starts to feel like it's doing gymnastics without a coach. Time is such a constant part of our lives that it's hard to imagine anything without it. You wake up, you check the clock, you wait for your coffee to brew, you go about your day, all of it tied to time. But is time truly fundamental? Or could it be something that only seems real from our perspective, while the universe itself doesn't really need it? That's what we're diving into tonight. So get comfortable, let curiosity lead the way, and let's try to make sense of one of the deepest mysteries ever. First, let's set the stage with what we actually mean by time. It sounds obvious, right? Time is what makes yesterday different from today, and today different from tomorrow. It's the flow of events, the ticking clock that keeps everything moving. But physics isn't so casual about definitions. In classical mechanics, the kind of physics Isaac Newton gave us, time was absolute. It was this invisible, universal background that ticked at the same rate for everyone, everywhere. Newton saw it as a kind of cosmic metronome that everything else danced to. Drop an apple from a tree in England or push a cart in France. Time would be the same for both events. Simple, neat, and intuitive. But then along came Albert Einstein, and he basically said, "Nice try, Newton, but that's not how the universe works." Einstein's theory of relativity showed us that time isn't universal at all. It's relative. The faster you move, the slower your clock ticks compared to someone standing still. Even gravity can stretch or compress time, so that someone near a massive object experiences moments differently than someone far away. Suddenly, time wasn't this fixed stage anymore. It was woven into the fabric of space itself, creating space-time. And this is where things start to get interesting for our question. Because if time isn't absolute, maybe it's not fundamental either. Imagine, for example, a movie. You sit down, hit play, and the story unfolds. Characters talk, things happen, there's a beginning, middle, and end. That's how we experience it. But the movie itself, the actual reel or file, doesn't have time inside it. All the frames exist at once. You can freeze it, rewind, skip ahead. The sense of time comes from how it's played back to you. Some physicists think the universe might be like that. What we call time could just be our way of experiencing a much larger reality where all events, past, present, and future, already coexist. In other words, the universe might not actually need time. It might just be something our minds generate to make sense of the cosmic movie we're inside. Of course, that's easy to say, harder to prove. One of the biggest puzzles in physics right now is that time shows up differently depending on which branch of science you're looking at. In everyday physics, like when you throw a baseball, time is just part of the equations and it moves in a clear direction, forward. The ball doesn't unthrow itself, but at the level of fundamental particles, the equations don't really care about time's direction. They work just as well if you flip time backwards. That means the basic building blocks of reality don't seem to need an arrow of time. The arrow only appears when you zoom out to larger systems, like your coffee cooling on the counter or the universe expanding. So the big question is time something fundamental, or is it just an emergent property that shows up when you put a lot of stuff together? Let's pause for a second, because I know this can feel abstract. Here's a simpler way to think about it. Imagine you're looking at a picture of a snowflake. It looks beautifully ordered, symmetrical, almost alive with meaning. But the snowflake isn't sitting there thinking, ah, yes, I am symmetrical. The order is something your mind perceives. Similarly, time might be a kind of order we perceive in the universe. Our brains notice change, and we stitch those changes together into a timeline, giving us the sensation of past flowing into present, flowing into future. But what if change can exist without time? What if the universe just is a giant block of reality with everything in place, and our minds create the illusion of flow? That idea is called the block universe, or eternalism. In this picture, all of history and the future are laid out like pages in a book. You're not really moving through time, you're just experiencing one page at a time. The page doesn't vanish after you read it, and the next page already exists, even if you haven't turned to it yet. Some physicists like this model because it neatly explains relativity. There's no universal now that everyone shares. Your now might be someone else's later or earlier, but others find it deeply unsatisfying because it makes time feel like a kind of illusion. If everything already exists, where's the room for choice, change, or free will? Now let's add a twist. Some approaches to quantum gravity, the attempt to merge quantum mechanics and general relativity, suggest that time might not exist at the most fundamental level. Take the Wheeler-DeWitt equation, for example. It's a proposed equation for the universe as a whole, and guess what? Time doesn't even show up in it. It describes the universe as this static, timeless entity. That's kind of unsettling. It's like physics is telling us, surprise. The deepest layer of reality doesn't need clocks. If that's true, then what we call time might be something that only emerges when conscious beings like us look at the universe. We bring the sense of flow with us, like a projector shining a beam of light that animates a film strip. But before we get carried away, let's bring in a bit of humour. Imagine trying to explain a timeless universe to your boss when you're late for work. Sorry I'm late, but technically time doesn't exist, so you can't blame me. I'm not sure that would hold up in a performance review. The fact is, whether or not time is fundamental, it feels real. And not just to us. Thermodynamics, the science of heat and energy, practically screams about time's arrow. If you drop an ice cube in hot coffee, it melts, and you never see the opposite. That one-way street of disorder increasing is what we call entropy, and it's the main reason we believe in the forward march of time. Without it, the universe might just look like a big static block. Here's where things get truly strange. Some scientists argue that entropy itself doesn't require time. It creates it. In other words, the reason you feel time passing is because the universe naturally evolves from order to disorder. The growth of entropy gives you the impression of a direction. It's not that time flows forward, it's that entropy increases, and your mind translates that into a story of moments moving along. So without entropy, maybe there wouldn't even be a sense of time at all. The universe could exist just fine, but it would feel like one eternal instant. No yesterday, no tomorrow, just is. Think of it like a deck of cards. Shuffle it enough times and you'll probably never get the exact same order again. Entropy is like that shuffling. It guarantees variety and change. And as long as things keep changing, we interpret that as time moving forward. But what if the deck were frozen, locked into one arrangement forever? The cards would still exist, the deck would still exist, but nothing would happen. Could that be a universe without time? Maybe. It would be kind of boring, though. A timeless cosmos might technically exist, but it wouldn't have stories, motion, or growth. It would be more like a snapshot than a movie. And yet maybe that's exactly the point. Some philosophers argue that the universe is more like a mathematical object than a flowing event. Think of a triangle. It just exists. It doesn't need time. It has properties, structure, relationships between its sides, but it doesn't change. Some suggest the universe could be like that, a giant, timeless mathematical structure that contains everything. We just happen to be the kind of beings who experience it as if it were unfolding. Now, here's where I want to pause and leave you with something to ponder. If time is an illusion, but it's such a convincing one that it governs our entire lives, does that mean our experience is wrong? Or does it mean reality is richer than we think? Maybe time doesn't exist at the foundation of the universe, but it does exist at the level where consciousness emerges. Like colours. Technically, the physical world is just wavelengths of light, but our brains create the experience of red or blue. The colours aren't real in the strictest sense, but they're not fake either. They're how we interact with the underlying physics. Maybe time is like that. Not fundamental, but real enough for us to live in. And with that, we've opened the door to a universe that might not need time at all, even if we can't imagine living without it. So if the universe doesn't actually need time, then why do we feel so completely bound to it? Every single part of our lives seems chained to clocks, calendars, and deadlines. But if physics hints that time might not be fundamental, it raises a deeper question. Are we mistaking the map for the territory? In other words, maybe time is the human interpretation of something more profound, some hidden structure of reality that doesn't tick at all. Tonight, let's pull that thread a little further. One of the best ways to get at this problem is to look at what time does for us. Strip away all the philosophical baggage and ask, what's time actually good for? At its simplest, time gives us order. It allows us to say, this happened before that. Without time, how would we even describe cause and effect? You hit a billiard ball and it rolls across the table. You strike a match and then you get a flame. Time gives us the narrative spine of reality. But here's the twist. Cause and effect themselves might not need time in the way we think. In quantum mechanics, for example, there are situations where events don't have a clear order. Two particles can become entangled so that measuring one seems to instantly affect the other, no matter how far apart they are. But in that exchange, what came first? Did one measurement cause the other, or are they simply linked outside of time as we know it? This is where quantum weirdness really starts to blur the lines. There are even experiments that suggest you can have what's called a causal loop, where the order of events becomes ambiguous. Imagine flipping a coin and only afterward deciding whether or not you're going to flip it. It sounds impossible, but quantum systems play by stranger rules than everyday objects. If these effects scale up even slightly, it might mean that time isn't the backbone of cause and effect. It's more like the costume. The real story is happening behind the scenes, and we just perceive it in temporal clothing. Now let's think cosmically. We often describe the universe as having a beginning, the Big Bang, followed by an expansion that continues today. That description makes time feel unavoidable. You've got a before, nothing, or something else, a bang, and an after. But what if that's not really the best way to picture it? Some theories suggest the universe didn't begin in time. It began time. The Big Bang wasn't just the start of matter and energy, it was the start of the ticking itself. Which means asking what happened before the Big Bang might not make sense. It's like asking, what's north of the North Pole? The concept itself breaks down. Stephen Hawking liked to explain it with the analogy of Earth's surface. Imagine shrinking down to a two-dimensional creature crawling across the globe. If you walk south, you eventually get to the South Pole. If you walk north, you eventually get to the North Pole. You can't go further north than that, because north stops being meaningful. Similarly, time might simply not exist beyond the Big Bang. There was no before, because before requires time, and time only came into being with the expansion of the cosmos. In that sense, the universe without time is not just possible, it may have been the starting condition of everything. But here's a tricky follow-up. If the universe can exist without time, even for an instant, what's stopping it from existing in that state permanently? This question leads us into some fascinating speculative physics. Some cosmologists think the Big Bang might not have been a bang at all, but a kind of transition, a shift from a timeless quantum state into a universe that experiences time. Think of water freezing into ice. The molecules are still there in both cases, but the structure changes. In the same way, maybe the cosmos froze into a state where time became part of its structure, even though at a more fundamental level it's timeless. This ties into an idea called quantum cosmology, where the universe is described as a wave function rather than a timeline. A wave function doesn't evolve in time the way a ball rolling down a hill does. It just exists as a superposition of possibilities. If the universe itself is like that, then time only shows up when you take a certain perspective, like when you observe a specific particle out of a quantum cloud. Our perspective as beings inside the universe might create the illusion of time's passage, just as an observer collapses a wave function into a definite state. Now let's zoom in again to everyday life. Imagine you're baking a cake. You put the batter in the oven, set a timer, and wait. The cake rises, browns, and eventually burns if you forget it. This is time in action. You start with one state and end with another. But physics might tell you that the entire sequence, raw batter, rising cake, burnt disaster, all exists at once in the block universe. From outside time, the cake is eternally all those things. From inside time, you're the poor baker panicking as smoke fills the kitchen. This shows us something important. Even if the universe doesn't fundamentally need time, the way we interact with it seems completely inseparable from the concept. Time might not exist independently, but it's woven into the experience of existing. Let's stir in a bit of humour here, because this can get heavy. Imagine trying to live in a universe without time. You tell your friend, "Let's grab lunch." They ask, "When?" And you just shrug. There's no when. There's just lunchness floating around. You're both eternally hungry and eternally full at the same time. It's a nightmare for restaurant reservations. And don't even think about Netflix binging. You can't ask, what episode comes next, because everything is now. On some level, that absurdity helps us see why time feels indispensable to consciousness, even if the math suggests otherwise. And that leads us to a fascinating possibility. Maybe time is not a property of the universe, but a property of minds. Think about memory. You remember what you had for breakfast, you anticipate what you'll have for dinner, and you experience the present moment of snacking in between. Without memory and anticipation, would you even feel time passing? Probably not. Animals experience time differently depending on their brain structure. A mayfly, which lives for a single day, has a very different temporal world than a tortoise that can live for centuries. To a hummingbird, flapping its wings dozens of times a second, our conversations might seem slow motion. To us, its life is a blur. Maybe time is partly about biology, a way our brains measure change in order to survive. If that's the case, then the universe doesn't need time. It only needs creatures who perceive it. Now, if you're wondering whether this means reality is just one big trick of perception, don't worry, you're not alone. Philosophers have been wrestling with this for centuries. Immanuel Kant argued that time and space are not things out there in the universe, but frameworks our minds impose to make sense of reality. They're like mental goggles we can't take off. We don't see the world as it truly is. We see it filtered through the lenses of time and space. If Kant was right, then asking whether the universe can exist without time is almost like asking whether music can exist without sound waves. The answer might be yes at one level, but our access to it is permanently shaped by the medium we use. Let's bring physics back in. One of the strangest insights from relativity is that simultaneity is relative. Two events that look simultaneous to you might look sequential to someone moving at a different speed. This suggests there's no universal present. If there's no universal present, then maybe the whole idea of time flowing is just an artifact of how we slice reality. Each observer slices the universe into nows differently, like cutting a loaf of bread at different angles. The loaf itself doesn't care. It's all there. We're the ones imposing the slices. So in that sense, the universe without time is not hypothetical. It's right here, always existing as the loaf. It's our slicing that creates the illusion of time. Now let's throw in entropy again, because it's the big elephant in the timeless room. Why do we experience a flow from past to future? Because entropy increases. But what if entropy is just another way of describing the geometry of the universe? Some researchers argue that the growth of entropy might itself be timeless. It's not that disorder spreads in time, it's that if you look at the structure of the universe as a whole, the low entropy states and high entropy states are arranged in a pattern. From our point of view, moving through that pattern feels like time passing, but from a timeless perspective, it's just all laid out already. The melting ice cube, the steaming coffee, the expanding galaxies, all there in the structure like a sculpture. This leaves us with an unsettling conclusion. If the universe doesn't actually need time, then maybe our sense of being swept along the river of moments is just the brain's way of processing reality. Instead of time being the water that carries us, maybe we're the boat dragging a wake through a still pond. The wake looks like motion, but the water itself was never moving. That image captures both the eeriness and the beauty of a timeless universe. And to be fair, not all physicists agree with the timeless view. Some argue that time is every bit as real as space, that it's not an illusion, but a fundamental ingredient. Without it, equations may describe static structures, but those structures wouldn't feel alive. And here's the kicker. Even the physicists who argue time isn't fundamental are using time to argue about it. They write equations step by step. They publish papers after years of work. They sip coffee that cools while they ponder timelessness. It's like fish debating whether water exists while still swimming in it. If we've been entertaining the possibility that the universe doesn't fundamentally need time, then part 3 takes us into even stranger territory. What happens to reality if time isn't real? How do we talk about beginnings, endings, motion, or even our own lives, if underneath it all, there's no cosmic clock? This is where things shift from just physics into philosophy, with a few detours through paradoxes that will either blow your mind or make you want to throw your alarm clock out the window. Let's start with the idea of motion. You get up from your chair, walk across the room, pour a glass of water. We would normally say you move through time while also moving through space. But if time isn't real, what is motion exactly? The ancient Greek philosopher Zeno wrestled with this long before physics was around. His famous paradoxes include the one where Achilles races a tortoise. Achilles runs fast, the tortoise runs slow. But if Achilles gives the tortoise a head start, Zeno argued, Achilles can never actually catch it. Why? Because by the time Achilles reaches where the tortoise was, the tortoise has moved a little farther ahead. No matter how small the gap gets, there's always another step to take. On paper, Achilles never wins. Of course, in real life, Achilles does win. The paradox highlights how tricky it is to define motion when you break it into infinite steps. And at its core, it's a problem of time. Without time, how do we make sense of going from here to there? Modern physics answers Zeno with calculus, but the paradox still whispers something deeper. Maybe motion isn't about passing through moments. Maybe motion is just different configurations of the universe existing in relation to each other, and our brains interpret them as a flow. Like frames of a film reel, each one already exists, and it's only our experience of them in sequence that gives the illusion of movement. Now let's extend that idea. Imagine every possible snapshot of the universe exists timelessly. One snapshot has you tying your shoes. Another has you sipping coffee. Another has you laughing at a joke you haven't heard yet. They all just exist, like pages scattered across a table. In this timeless view, your life isn't a journey, but a collection of states. You don't move from one to another. They're all just there. Your brain, however, stitches them together into a story, giving you the sense of living through time. It's a little like looking at a flip book. The drawings themselves don't move, but when you flip the pages, your mind creates the illusion of animation. Maybe existence works the same way. The universe doesn't move, but our consciousness flips through states, creating the movie of life. But this raises a question that might make you squirm. If all states already exist, does that mean free will is just an illusion too? Are we simply experiencing a predetermined sequence? This is one of the big philosophical implications of a timeless universe. If the future is as real as the present, then technically it already exists. You just haven't read that page yet. That means your choices might not really be choices. They're just part of the block universe. Some people find that idea horrifying, like being a character in a novel that's already been written. Others find it comforting. After all, it means your future self is already out there, existing, just waiting for you to catch up. Physics itself is divided here. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics do leave room for uncertainty and probability, where the future isn't fixed but arises when an observation is made. The so-called Copenhagen interpretation suggests that until something is observed, it exists in a cloud of probabilities. In that sense, the universe is not entirely written. It's more like a choose-your-own-adventure book, where some of the storylines already exist, but which one you land on depends on your choices, or at least on quantum randomness. Then there's the many worlds interpretation, which says that all possibilities happen, just in different branches of reality. Every decision, every quantum flip, every roll of the dice creates a new universe where one outcome plays out. In that picture, the universe doesn't just exist without time, it exists as an eternal fractal of possibilities. Free will becomes less about choosing a single path and more about which version of you is aware of which branch. And then there's another unsettling angle. If time doesn't exist, what does eternity mean? Usually, we think of eternity as endless time, like an infinite line stretching forward forever. But in a timeless universe, eternity might mean something else entirely. It's not infinite duration, it's all existence, all at once, with no ticking clock. Eternity is not endless time, it's no time at all. That's a tough one to wrap your head around, because our brains are so wired to imagine duration. The human mind likes stories, beginnings, middles, and ends. But eternity without time is more like a painting than a novel. Everything is there in one picture, not unfolding moment by moment. Here's where humour can help us digest this. Imagine trying to sell someone a timeless watch. It's guaranteed to last forever, you say. They ask, how do I tell the time? And you shrug. You don't. It's timeless. It's the kind of product that would either flop instantly or become a hipster sensation. But it illustrates the weirdness of talking about eternity without time. It forces us to rethink words we usually take for granted. Let's circle back to physics. One of the biggest challenges in uniting quantum mechanics and general relativity is the role of time. General relativity treats time as part of the fabric of space-time, curved by mass and energy. Quantum mechanics, meanwhile, often treats time as an external backdrop, a parameter you can measure against. When physicists try to merge the two into a single theory of everything, the clash over time becomes a major obstacle. Some attempts, like loop quantum gravity, propose that space and time are not continuous, but made up of discrete chunks, tiny atoms of space-time. In that picture, time might emerge from deeper, timeless structures, kind of like how temperature emerges from the motion of molecules. Temperature isn't a property of one molecule, it's a collective effect. Similarly, time might not be a property of the universe's deepest building blocks, but something that appears when enough of them interact. This idea, that time is emergent, is gaining traction. It's like saying time is not the stage, but the play. Without the actors, without the interactions, there's no performance. That flips our whole intuition upside down. We usually think events happen inside time, but maybe time only exists because events happen. It's not the container, it's the result. Without change, without entropy, without interaction, there is no time. Which brings us back to that earlier thought. Maybe the universe doesn't need time, but we do, because we're built out of change and interaction. Our biology, our psychology, our memory, all of it screams time into existence, even if the cosmos itself doesn't care. And let's not forget, our brains are notorious storytellers. Neuroscience shows that memory isn't a perfect recording device. Every time you recall an event, your brain reconstructs it, editing details, sometimes even fabricating parts. That means your sense of past is already more of a narrative than an objective reality. If the past is reconstructed and the future is imagined, then what you really have is the present moment. But even that might be a construction, stitched together from sensory input that your brain processes with delay. In a way, your mind is always living slightly in the past, because it takes time, there's that word again, for information to travel from your senses to your awareness. So our entire experience of time might just be a useful illusion, a survival tool evolved to help us predict, plan, and navigate. The universe may not have time built in, but our brains sure do. This raises another fascinating idea. Could other forms of consciousness experience reality without time? If we met an alien species whose brains operated completely differently, Maybe they wouldn't perceive a flow from past to future. Maybe they'd see everything at once, like a four-dimensional vision. They wouldn't remember and anticipate the way we do. They'd just know. To them, our obsession with clocks and calendars might seem primitive, like cave drawings of something bigger. That possibility is both humbling and exciting, because it reminds us that our human view of time might not be the only lens through which reality can be experienced. To make this relatable, let's play with the idea of dreams. When you dream, time doesn't behave normally. A dream that feels like hours can happen in minutes. Events can unfold out of order. People can appear and vanish without explanation. And yet it all feels natural while you're inside it. Only when you wake up do you realize how bizarre the timing was. Dreams show us that the brain can generate experiences without needing consistent time. What if waking reality is another kind of dream, just one with stricter rules? Maybe our sense of time is not as absolute as it feels. It's just a particular mode of perception. And here's the kicker. If time is an illusion, that doesn't make it unimportant. Illusions can be powerful. A rainbow isn't a real object. It's a play of light and water droplets and perspective. But that doesn't make it meaningless. Time could be the same way. Even if it's not fundamental, it structures everything we care about. Our lives, our memories, our hopes. It gives meaning to growth, change, and stories. Without time, you wouldn't have childhood or adulthood, beginnings or endings. The universe without time might exist, but it would be sterile. No music, no history, no anticipation. So maybe the answer isn't whether the universe can exist without time. It probably can. The more interesting question is whether we can, and judging by how much we depend on it, the answer might be no. We're creatures of time, whether or not time itself exists. We've been circling around the strange possibility that the universe doesn't really need time, but now it's worth asking. What happens to some of our most basic ideas if time isn't real? Things like growth, decay, memory, and even identity. If time is just an emergent feature or even an illusion, then what exactly are we when we say we're alive right now? Let's peel this onion a little further, even if it makes our eyes water. Let's start with life itself. Living things seem inseparable from time. A seed becomes a tree, a child becomes an adult, an old star burns out. If you remove time, what happens to the whole idea of living and dying? Some philosophers argue that in a timeless universe, you don't really live in the sense of passing through stages. Instead, your entire life simply exists as a complete pattern. The baby, the teenager, the adult, the elder, they're all equally real, just different parts of the same timeless structure. From this perspective, you never actually grow up or grow old. You simply are all of those things, woven into the fabric of reality. That sounds comforting on one level, like immortality by default. But it also strips away the drama of becoming, which is the part of life most of us find meaningful. Now let's talk about memory. Memory is what creates our sense of continuity. You remember what you had for breakfast, which connects you to a version of yourself earlier in the day. That memory links moments into a chain, and the chain becomes the story you call your life. But if time doesn't exist, what is memory? One possibility is that memory is simply a structural relationship between different states of the universe. In one state, your brain contains a memory of eating eggs. In another, it contains a memory of walking to work. They're not actually before and after, they just both exist. It's like having multiple saved files on a computer game. Each one is complete in itself. There's no actual flow between them unless you decide to load them in order. So your sense of continuity might just be the result of your brain being one of those states that happens to point to others. The flow isn't real, the connections are. But here's where things get slippery. If the universe doesn't need time, then the concept of now becomes almost meaningless. What does it mean to say something exists right now, if all states are equally real? Physicist Julian Barber has argued that the present is just one configuration of the universe among infinitely many. He calls these configurations nows. Each now exists timelessly, like a snapshot. Our experience of motion and change is just the sensation of moving through these nows, even though they all exist already. In Barber's view, the universe is like a vast gallery of still photographs. We're not watching a movie, we're just conscious in one photo at a time. It's a bold idea, and one that makes you question whether time really flows, or whether we're the ones doing the flowing. Now, if that's true, then death looks different too. In a timeless universe, you don't really stop existing. The configurations of you, laughing, crying, reading, existing, are all still there. Always there, never erased. From inside time, it feels like life is fleeting. From outside, it's permanent. You never lose your childhood, you never lose your favourite moments. They're written into the structure of the cosmos, like letters carved into stone. If that sounds poetic, it's because timelessness often blurs into something that feels spiritual. It invites the question, if time isn't real, does that mean everything is eternal? But let's bring this back down to physics before we drift too far into poetry. Consider entropy again, the ever-growing disorder that seems to give time its arrow. Entropy is why eggs scramble but don't unscramble, why coffee cools but doesn't heat itself up, why your bedroom gets messy unless you put in work to clean it. It's the great one-way street. But what if entropy isn't about time moving forward? What if entropy is just describing the difference between different configurations of the universe? In that case, the arrow of time is not a fundamental direction, but simply the way we, as conscious observers, interpret the structure. Imagine walking through a library where the books are arranged from most ordered to most disordered. You'd think you were walking forward, but the library itself is timeless. All the books are there at once, you're just giving it direction by moving. That might be what our brains are doing with entropy. Now let's tackle identity. Who are you if time doesn't exist? We usually think of ourselves as continuous beings, shaped by our past and heading toward our future. But in a timeless universe, you're not continuous at all. You're a collection of different versions. The you who was 5 years old is still real. The you who will someday retire is already real. You're like a deck of cards, each card a different version of you. Right now, you're holding one card. That doesn't mean the others don't exist. So when you say, I am me, it might not be about continuity through time, but about which version of the pattern your consciousness is currently experiencing. This is both liberating and unsettling. Liberating because nothing is ever truly lost. Unsettling because it challenges the idea that there's one single you travelling through time. If you want to bring some humour into this, think about birthdays. We celebrate them as markers of time. Congratulations, you're older. But if time doesn't exist, birthdays are kind of a cosmic joke. You're not older, you're just accessing a different configuration of yourself that was always there. The cake is real though, so maybe it's worth keeping the tradition. Let's also look at the universe as a whole. Cosmologists often ask, is the universe finite or infinite, expanding forever or looping back on itself? But if time isn't real, those questions might not make sense. The universe could simply exist as a timeless totality, like a mathematical object. Think of a circle. A circle doesn't start at one point and end at another. It just exists as a whole. Maybe the universe is like that. Its existence is not a story with a beginning and an end, but a shape, timeless and complete. This leads us into one of the most mind-bending ideas in physics, the holographic principle. It suggests that our three-dimensional universe might actually be a projection of information stored on a two-dimensional surface. If that's the case, then time might also be an emergent projection. It's not fundamental to the information, it's just how the projection appears from the inside. That would make time a kind of special effect, like CGI in a movie. It looks real, but it's not actually part of the raw code. The universe doesn't need it. It's just the way the data plays out when viewed from our perspective. Of course, we can't talk about timelessness without poking at one of the strangest consequences. If time doesn't exist, then change itself is questionable. We experience change constantly. Seasons, aging, shifting emotions. But if all states exist equally, then change is just the way our minds string them together. You don't really go from young to old. You simply are both young and old, just in different states. It's like looking at different photographs of yourself. The photos don't change, you just look at them in sequence. That's what change might really be. Perception, not reality. Now here's a fun thought experiment. Imagine aliens who truly experience the universe without time. They don't see sequences, they don't remember or anticipate. They perceive all states at once. How would they see us? Maybe to them, humans are like sculptures, existing in 4 dimensions, with every moment of our lives etched into us. They wouldn't ask, "What are you doing now?" because now wouldn't mean anything. They'd see you as a complete being, with all your moments visible at once. To them, you'd look like a strange, stretched-out creature. A baby at one end, an elder at the other, all connected in a single, timeless shape. That's not science fiction. It's one possible way a timeless reality could be perceived. But let's not lose the human side of this. Even if the universe doesn't need time, we do. Without time, there's no suspense, no jokes, no anticipation of dessert. Humor itself relies on timing. Imagine telling a joke in a timeless universe. 2 atoms walk into a bar, and immediately the punchline is already there. Comedy dies without time. So does music. Music is literally the art of structuring sound in time. A timeless universe might contain all notes at once, but you'd never hear a melody. You'd just have a big, eternal chord. That might be beautiful in its own way, but it wouldn't be a song. Here's the paradox. We use time constantly in physics, and yet some of the deepest equations work just fine without it. It's like the universe is telling us, sure, you can use time as a tool, but don't assume it's the real deal. That tension is worth exploring. Start with Newton. In classical physics, time was treated like a perfectly steady, universal clock. Every tick was the same everywhere, for everyone. It was absolute, unchanging, and reliable. Newton once said, "Time flows equably without relation to anything external." In other words, time was a river that carried everything along. That made physics simple. You could predict the position of a planet, the fall of an apple, or the swing of a pendulum just by plugging into equations that treated time as universal. For centuries, it worked beautifully. But it turns out Newton's river is more like a mirage. Enter Einstein, who shattered that certainty with relativity. Time, Einstein showed, is not absolute. It's relative. It bends, it stretches, it slows, it speeds up. Time is inseparable from space, creating the four-dimensional fabric we call space-time. Suddenly, the idea of one universal clock was out the window. Two observers can measure time differently depending on their speed or their position near a massive object. Fly near the speed of light and time slows down for you relative to someone standing still. Stand near a black hole and your clock ticks slower compared to someone farther away. In this picture, time is no longer the universal river. It's a flexible dimension woven together with space. That's already strange enough, but relativity doesn't go as far as removing time. It just makes time weirder. Now let's bring in quantum mechanics. This is where things get truly bizarre. At the quantum level, particles don't have definite positions or velocities until they're observed. They exist in superpositions, fuzzy clouds of probabilities. The equations that describe them, the Schrödinger equation, rely on time as a parameter. But here's the catch. When you try to combine quantum mechanics with general relativity to create a theory of quantum gravity, time starts disappearing. The Wheeler-DeWitt equation, a key attempt at this, doesn't even have time in it. It describes the universe as a static, timeless wave function. To physicists, this was both shocking and awkward. How can the fundamental equation of the universe not include time when our daily lives depend on it? That's when some thinkers started considering that time might be emergent rather than fundamental. Like temperature. Temperature doesn't exist at the microscopic level. You can't point to one atom and say it has a temperature. Temperature is what emerges when you look at trillions of atoms together. Maybe time is like that. You can't find it in the basic equations because it's not a basic ingredient. It's what emerges when you look at the large-scale behavior of matter and energy. Time might be a kind of statistical illusion, something that shows up when you zoom out. That's humbling, because it means time is real enough for us, but not real for the universe. This brings us to another concept, the block universe. According to relativity, past, present, and future all exist equally. There's no special now that slides forward through time. Instead, reality is like a giant, four-dimensional block. All events are laid out, just as all locations in space exist at once. You don't create the future as you move through it. It's already there, just like New York City is already there, even if you're standing in Paris. You're not traveling through time, you're just experiencing one slice of the block. This vision of reality fits with physics, but clashes with human intuition. We feel like the present is special, but physics tells us it's not. It's unsettling, like finding out your favorite character in a book has no free will, because the ending was already written. Speaking of free will, this is where timelessness pokes at philosophy. If the block universe is real, then everything is already there. Your birth, your choices, your death, and all the little decisions in between. There's no becoming, only being. That seems to rob us of free will. But another interpretation says free will is simply our experience of choosing one slice of the block over another. From the outside view, it's all predetermined. From the inside, it feels like freedom. Think of it like playing a video game you've already beaten. The game has a fixed structure, but you still feel like you're making choices as you play. Timelessness might work the same way. Now let's take a detour into black holes, because they're laboratories for breaking time. Near the event horizon of a black hole, time slows dramatically relative to an outside observer. To someone falling in, time feels normal. But from outside, you appear to freeze at the edge forever. Which is the real truth? Both perspectives are valid within relativity. This tells us that time isn't some absolute background, it depends on your frame of reference. In fact, at the singularity at the center of a black hole, our equations break down completely. Time ceases to have any meaning. So in one of the most extreme regions of the universe, time is not just flexible, it's gone. That hints that maybe the universe doesn't need it after all. Let's not forget cosmology either. The universe itself might have started without time. The Big Bang Theory describes space and time emerging together. Asking what happened before the Big Bang may be meaningless because before requires time, and time didn't exist yet. Stephen Hawking once compared it to asking what's north of the North Pole. The question doesn't make sense. Time in this view is not eternal. It had a beginning, and maybe it can have an end. That means the universe can exist without time at its boundaries, which suggests time is more like a local condition than a cosmic law. Here's where things get stranger. Some physicists, like Carlo Rovelli, argue that time isn't even needed for describing the universe at all. Rovelli's theory of loop quantum gravity treats time as an illusion. Instead of describing change as things evolving in time, it describes relationships between events. Reality, in his view, is a network of interactions, and time is just the way we perceive those interactions from our human perspective. Like reading a comic book, you see the panels in sequence, but the entire story already exists on the page. You're the one moving through it, not the story itself. That leads us to ask, why do we feel time so strongly if it's not real? The answer may lie in our biology. Our brains are prediction machines. They're constantly comparing the past with possible futures to guide our actions. That constant act of predicting and remembering creates the sensation of flow. Consciousness itself may be tied to time perception. Without it, we'd be trapped in an eternal present, unable to function. In fact, certain neurological conditions give us hints about what this would feel like. Some patients with brain damage lose the ability to sequence events. To them, everything feels jumbled, timeless. It's profoundly disorienting. That suggests time might be more about how brains process information than about how the universe actually works. Let's throw in a touch of humor here. If time is an illusion, it explains a lot about Mondays. Maybe Mondays don't actually exist. They're just one of those persistent illusions consciousness plays on us. Sadly, deadlines exist whether or not time is real, so this theory might not save us from work. On a more serious note, think about how deeply time structures human culture. History, calendars, holidays, birthdays. All of it assumes time flows. If we discovered definitively that time isn't fundamental, it wouldn't just change physics. It would ripple through philosophy, religion, even how we think about morality. Morality often relies on consequences over time. If I do this, then later that will happen. But if all moments exist equally, then consequences are just part of the block. You don't change them, you simply experience them. That doesn't necessarily kill morality, but it reframes it. You're not steering the future, you're inhabiting the structure of reality as it already is. That's a heavy thought to carry to a dinner party. One more angle worth exploring is the connection between time and information. Some researchers suggest that what we call time is actually the growth of information in the universe. As particles interact, new information is created. That process gives rise to the arrow of time. In this view, time isn't fundamental, it's just bookkeeping for information. The universe isn't ticking forward, it's accumulating records. And what are we as conscious beings if not record keepers? Our memories, our histories, even the stories we tell are all ways of preserving information. Maybe time is simply the way information organizes itself, and we mistake that for a flowing river. So where does this leave us? The scientific picture of time is conflicted. Newton treated it as absolute. Einstein made it relative. Quantum physics makes it vanish, and modern thinkers suggest it might just be emergent. It's not that science has failed to understand time. It's that time may not be the kind of thing that can be understood in the way we want. It may not be a fundamental building block of reality, but rather a tool we use to make sense of it. Like a ruler measuring distance, time may just be a measuring stick for change, not a feature of the universe itself. And yet, here we are, living in what feels like an unstoppable stream. Even if physics tells us time isn't real, our experience stubbornly says otherwise. Maybe that's okay. After all, our experience of colour doesn't reflect fundamental physics either. Red doesn't exist out there in the universe. It's just a wavelength of light that our brains interpret as red. Time may be like colour, not fundamental, but very real for those who perceive it. By now we've taken time apart, flipped it upside down, and put it under the microscope. We've looked at whether it flows, whether it's fundamental, whether it's just an illusion stitched together by our brains. But let's zoom out even further and ask, if the universe doesn't really need time, then how do we explain all the things that depend on it? Things like cause and effect, progress, evolution, and even our most basic understanding of stories. Because as humans, we are creatures addicted to beginnings, middles, and ends. Remove time, and you remove the skeleton of our thinking. That's worth picking apart. Start with causality, the idea that one thing causes another. You drop a ball and it falls. You light a match and it burns. You study hard and you ace the exam, or at least pass without crying. Cause and effect seem obvious, but cause and effect require time. The cause comes before the effect. Without time, what happens to causality? Some physicists suggest that causality is not fundamental but emergent, just like time. Events don't actually cause each other, they simply exist in relation to one another. The match burning and the flame appearing are not a sequence, but a structural connection. From this perspective, causality is less about arrows and more about geometry. It's like a puzzle where all the pieces fit, not because one caused the other, but because the structure demands it. That turns our understanding of progress upside down. We think of progress as movement through time, societies evolving, knowledge accumulating, technology advancing. But in a timeless universe, progress is just one configuration among others. There is no real movement, just different states that all exist. You're not advancing, you're simply part of a timeless structure where advanced states are as real as primitive ones. That's uncomfortable because it undermines our cherished narrative of improvement. Humanity may see itself as climbing a ladder, but in a timeless picture, the ladder is already fully built, with every rung existing equally. You're not climbing, you're just standing on one rung, looking at the others. This also reshapes evolution. Darwin's theory depends on generations unfolding through time, with small changes accumulating into big ones. But in a timeless view, evolution is not a process, it's a landscape. Every species, every adaptation, Every mutation exists simultaneously, woven into the timeless structure. You don't evolve, you simply are. The fossil record, from single-celled organisms to modern humans, is not a timeline but a panorama. This doesn't make evolution any less true, it just reframes it. Instead of being a story, it's a pattern. You're not a chapter in a book, you're a sentence in a poem that already exists in full. Now let's think about storytelling. Humans live by stories. We want arcs, beginnings, and resolutions. Myths, movies, novels, even jokes. They all rely on time. Remove time and stories collapse. Or do they? Some philosophers suggest that storytelling is our way of navigating a timeless universe. We impose sequences on reality to make sense of it. Our brains carve paths through the block universe, stringing events together into a narrative. In that sense, storytelling isn't just entertainment, it's survival. Without it, we'd be adrift in chaos. That might explain why stories feel so natural to us, why every culture tells them, why children demand them before bed. Stories give us a map, even if the territory doesn't actually have a timeline. Here's where humour comes in handy again. If time isn't real, then technically spoilers don't exist. You already know the ending, you just haven't looked at that slice yet. Imagine a timeless universe where everyone knows the last episode of a TV series before it even airs. The outrage would vanish, but so would the fun. Suspense requires time. Surprise requires time. So in a timeless cosmos, maybe the only thing keeping us entertained is our stubborn refusal to peek ahead. But let's shift from culture back to physics. One of the most fascinating aspects of a timeless universe is how it reframes symmetry. Physics loves symmetry. Conservation laws, like the conservation of energy, come from symmetries in nature. Eminather, one of the most brilliant mathematicians of the 20th century, showed that conservation of energy comes from the symmetry of time. If the laws of physics don't change over time, energy is conserved. That's elegant, but here's the kicker. If time doesn't exist, then conservation of energy may be a property of timeless structure, not of time itself. Symmetry still works, but time isn't needed to justify it. The math survives even if our clock doesn't. Another concept worth examining is timeless quantum entanglement. When two particles become entangled, their states are linked instantly, no matter how far apart they are. If one is spin up, the other is spin down, even if they're separated by light years. This seems to violate time because the connection is immediate, but if the universe is timeless, entanglement makes sense. The two particles don't exchange information in time. They are simply part of one timeless structure. The weirdness disappears once you stop insisting that events unfold sequentially. Entanglement isn't spooky action at a distance, it's timeless connection. Let's explore another layer. What would physics look like if it completely ditched time? Some researchers imagine a timeless formulation of reality where the universe is described purely by correlations. Instead of saying event A happens, then event B, you'd just say event A and event B exist in relation to each other. Equations wouldn't evolve, they'd just map out patterns. It's like describing a chessboard without saying who moved first. All the pieces are simply arranged in configurations that follow rules. That's what a timeless physics could be. Rules without sequences. If you're wondering how human consciousness fits into that, you're not alone. Consciousness seems inseparable from time. We experience ourselves as moving through moments. Neuroscience suggests that the brain stitches reality together in intervals, like frames in a movie. The movie feels continuous, but it's actually a series of discrete snapshots. If that's true, then maybe our experience of time is the brain's editing job. The film reel already exists in full. The brain just projects one frame after another to create the illusion of motion. Consciousness might be less about traveling through time and more about spotlighting certain slices of the block. That's wild because it means we're less like passengers on a river and more like readers flipping through pages of a book. Here's a thought experiment. Imagine an alien species that experiences the block universe differently. Instead of perceiving slices in order, they perceive them all at once. To them, humans might look like strange, worm-like beings stretched through 4 dimensions. Infants at one end, elders at the other, with all the in-between moments visible. To such beings, time wouldn't even be a concept. They'd see your entire life as a whole, like looking at a sculpture. They might pity us for being trapped in our illusion of flow, the way we pity goldfish with their supposed 3-second memory. Maybe we're the cosmic goldfish, forever replaying the illusion of now. But timelessness isn't just abstract speculation. It has consequences for how we think about existence itself. If all moments exist equally, then nothing is ever lost. The laughter you shared with a friend 10 years ago isn't gone. It exists timelessly. The first human who lit a fire still exists in their moment, just as real as you sitting here now. Even future events exist, already etched into the block. That can be comforting, like a guarantee that nothing truly disappears. But it can also be unsettling, because it suggests that tragedy too is eternal. Every heartbreak, every loss, every catastrophe, they're all permanently part of the structure. Eternity is both gift and curse in a timeless universe. And then there's the question of beginnings. In a timeless view, the idea of a beginning makes little sense. The Big Bang may not have been the start of time, but simply one part of the block. Asking what came before the Big Bang is like asking what's outside the edges of a map. The map doesn't have an outside, it just is. That perspective reframes cosmology in a radical way. Instead of searching for the first moment, maybe we should think of the universe as a whole object, timeless and complete. That would make our obsession with origins a bit misguided, like trying to find the first note of a symphony that always existed as a score. Now, because this is getting heavy, let's toss in another moment of humour. If time doesn't exist, then technically procrastination is impossible. You're not late, you're just existing in a different configuration. Try telling that to your boss though. I didn't miss the deadline and I exist timelessly, but not in relation. Let's just say timelessness may not save your job. On a more profound level, timelessness changes how we view meaning. Much of human meaning comes from the idea of change, overcoming challenges, achieving goals, growing wiser with age. If all states exist equally, then growth is just perception. Does that make life meaningless? Or does it make every moment infinitely meaningful because it's permanent? Some philosophers lean toward the latter. Each moment matters because it's eternal, forever etched into reality. You don't need to make meaning over time. It's already there, woven into the structure of existence. At the end of the day, the universe without time is not empty. It's full of every configuration, every possibility, every slice of being. It's us who add the flow, the direction, the story. The universe may not need time, but we do. Without it, we lose humour, suspense, growth, and the satisfaction of endings. The irony is that our illusion of time may be the very thing that makes life feel real, even if the cosmos itself is timeless. What does a universe without time mean for concepts like creation, possibility, and infinity? Because these are the places where our imaginations often trip, where our logical minds meet their limits, and where timelessness forces us to rethink everything from beginnings to the multiverse. Let's start with creation. Most people think of creation as an event. Something wasn't there, and then it was. A star forms, a planet cools, a baby is born. All of these depend on time, but in a timeless universe, creation doesn't happen. Everything simply is. The star, the planet, the baby, they're all slices in the block. There is no point at which they come into being. They're not created, they're embedded. Think of a painting. The brushstrokes don't happen in sequence to the painting. They're all there at once on the canvas. To the painter, the strokes happened in time, but to the painting, there is no before or after. Creation is simply structure. That's a radical way of thinking about existence. Now, what about possibility? In our everyday thinking, possibilities are about the future. Tomorrow, it might rain. You might take a new job. The world might change. But in a timeless view, there is no future. There is no not yet. Every possibility that exists timelessly. If you choose the new job, that reality exists. If you don't, that reality exists too. This connects directly with the idea of the multiverse. The block universe doesn't just contain one sequence of events, it could contain every possible branch. Every choice, every chance event, every quantum outcome, already part of the structure. We don't generate possibilities by moving forward in time. We discover which slice of the block our consciousness is experiencing. That's not just many worlds, that's all worlds, timelessly real. Here's where infinity enters. Infinity is hard enough to grasp with time. We imagine time stretching endlessly into the future or infinitely far into the past. But in a timeless universe, infinity isn't about endless extension, it's about boundless structure. It's not a line going forever. It's a shape that contains uncountable configurations. Infinity is not about never ending, it's about never lacking. Every possible moment, every possible state, already there. That makes infinity less about duration and more about existence itself. It's not that time goes on forever, it's that reality is infinitely full. Of course, these ideas bump into religion and spirituality too. Many religious traditions describe eternity not as endless time, but as timelessness. Eternity is not infinite seconds stacked one after another. It's the absence of seconds altogether. A state of being outside of time where everything is present at once. That resonates eerily well with modern physics. Theologians and physicists may be using different languages, but they're pointing at a similar mystery. Time may not be ultimate, and whether you call that eternity, the block universe, or the timeless wave function, the core idea is the same. Existence doesn't need time to be real. This also reframes how we think about death. In a timeless universe, death isn't an end. It's simply one slice among many. The you who is alive exists timelessly. The you who dies exists timelessly. Neither erases the other. From our perspective inside time, death feels final. From the outside, it's just another part of the sculpture. That doesn't necessarily make it less painful, but it does make it less absolute. Nothing is ever erased. Existence is permanent, even if our experience is not. Let's get playful with a thought experiment. Imagine you're reading a comic book where the entire story is already drawn, from page 1 to the last. To you, as the reader, time exists as you turn the pages. But to the comic, there is no time. Every panel is equally real. You could flip to the end, go back to the beginning, linger on the middle. The story doesn't flow. You create the flow by reading it in order. That's what a timeless universe might be like. We are the readers moving through panels. The panels themselves don't move, they just exist. Now let's bring in entropy again. In our ordinary understanding, entropy is why time has a direction. Things go from order to disorder. Ice melts. Buildings crumble. But if time doesn't exist, entropy might not be a process at all. Instead, it could simply describe the difference between different slices of the block. The ordered states exist. The disordered states exist. Entropy doesn't increase. It's just part of the structure. We perceive it as increase because our consciousness stitches the slices together in a sequence. Entropy, then, isn't a cosmic law. It's a trick of perspective. Another fascinating angle is timeless computation. Computers run programs step by step in time. But some researchers have imagined what computation might mean without time. Instead of steps, you'd have patterns. A timeless computer wouldn't process information. It would simply contain all possible outputs. You wouldn't run the program. You'd just access the configuration that corresponds to the answer. In a sense, the universe itself could be thought of as a timeless computer containing all possible states. That's both inspiring and unnerving. Imagine never having to wait for your phone to load, because in a timeless sense, it's already loaded. Here's another twist. What if timelessness solves paradoxes? Think of the grandfather paradox, where someone travels back in time and changes the past, creating contradictions. In a timeless universe, there is no back or forward. Every configuration just exists. No paradox, because there's no change in anything. All states are already real. You don't alter the past or the future, you just experience one slice or another. That could mean time travel is impossible, not because the laws of physics forbid it, but because time itself is not a thing to travel through. The universe is a sculpture, not a highway. And yet, despite all this, our experience keeps telling us time is real. Why? Neuroscience suggests the brain evolved to perceive time because it's useful. If you're an ancient human trying to survive, it matters if you can anticipate when the predator will strike or when the fruit will ripen. Time perception gives you an advantage. Evolution may have wired us to hallucinate time because it helps us stay alive. That doesn't make time real, it just makes it useful. Like a virtual reality headset, our brains project the illusion because it gets the job done. Reality may not need time, but survival does. If you want to laugh here, think about why waiting feels so long. If time isn't real, then technically you're not waiting at all. You're already at the destination. The DMV line doesn't exist. It's just one of those illusions evolution gave us. Sadly, the frustration still feels real. Timelessness might be true, but it's not going to make the line move faster. On a more profound level, timelessness challenges how we think about possibility itself. Normally, we imagine the future as open and the past as fixed. But in a timeless universe, both are fixed. Both exist. Both are equally real. The future isn't not yet, it already is. That can feel fatalistic, like everything is predetermined, but it can also feel liberating. Nothing is lost, nothing is uncertain. Existence is whole. Some philosophers call this eternalism, and while it can be unsettling, it also offers a kind of cosmic security blanket. You don't have to worry about the future. It's already real, as much as the present. This ties into the idea of possibility in quantum mechanics. When particles exist in superpositions, we think of them as having probabilities of different outcomes. But in a timeless universe, all those outcomes already exist. Probability isn't about the future, it's about which slice of the block you experience. The particle isn't going to collapse into one state. It already exists in all states. You're just tuned into one. That's a subtle but profound shift. The uncertainty is ours, not the universe's. Finally, let's bring in the human side again. What does timelessness mean for how we live? If every moment is eternal, then every moment matters. You don't have to chase the future or cling to the past. The smile you give a stranger, the kindness you show a friend, the laughter you share at dinner. These moments are not fleeting, they're permanent. That can change how you see life. Instead of worrying about time slipping away, you can realize it never does. Each slice of being is indelible, carved into the fabric of existence. That doesn't make you immortal in the traditional sense, but it does mean your life is never lost. At this point, timelessness may sound like one of those abstract theories you nod along with until you try to picture it in your head, and then your brain short-circuits. So let's spend some time playing with thought experiments and analogies, because often the best way to understand a strange concept is not through equations, but through stories and comparisons. After all, our minds are storytelling machines, and sometimes to grasp a timeless universe, you need a good metaphor more than a lecture. Let's begin with music. Normally, we think of music as something that happens in time. Notes played one after another, melodies unfolding. But imagine the sheet music of a symphony. Every note of the piece exists simultaneously on the page. The flutes, the violins, the drums, all there at once. Time comes in only when someone performs it. The musicians turn the simultaneous structure into a sequence. But the music itself, as notation, is timeless. You could say the universe is like the score, and our perception of time is the performance. Without the musicians, there's no unfolding, just a frozen harmony already complete. Now take film. A movie reel contains every frame of the story, beginning to end. The reel doesn't experience time. It simply exists as a strip of images. The projector makes us experience those frames in a flow, creating the illusion of movement and change. A timeless universe is like the reel. All frames exist. Our consciousness is the projector, giving us the sense of past, present, and future. And just like a movie, you can rewind, fast forward, or freeze a frame, but the reel itself doesn't change. Let's go even simpler, a loaf of bread. Imagine the universe as a loaf, and each slice is a moment. All slices exist. You can move your knife to any part of the loaf and reveal a cross-section, but the loaf itself is whole. Time is just how you slice it. To us, eating a sandwich requires moving through slices, but the loaf doesn't care. It exists as a complete object. It doesn't become anything, it simply is. That's reality without time. One more analogy, and this one might stick the best. A video game world saved on a disc. Every environment, every character model, every level is already on the disc. The game only seems to happen when you play it, but all of it exists timelessly in the data. The hero isn't created when you start the game. The code for them was already there. Likewise, the villain doesn't vanish when defeated. They remain coded. Playing gives the illusion of events, but the data is static. Our universe might be more like that disk than we realize. Now, thought experiments. Imagine a universe with no time, but only geometry. Just shapes, configurations, patterns. How would consciousness experience it? If your mind is embedded in that timeless geometry, maybe your sense of time arises because the structure itself contains ordered patterns. Like flipping through the pages of a book, You feel the story because of the way your attention moves, not because the book is changing. Consciousness could be the page turner, not the book. Here's another. Picture two beings in a timeless reality. They don't speak, they don't move, because movement requires time. But their entire interaction, every possible word, gesture, response, already exists in the structure. Do they still communicate? In one sense, yes. Communication isn't a sequence, but a relationship between states. Instead of, you say this, then I answer that, it's all baked in as a web of meaning. It sounds alien, but maybe that's what higher dimensional existence is like. Communication without conversation, knowledge without learning. And then there's the frozen moment, thought experiment. Suppose time stopped right now, everywhere, forever. The atoms in your body, the light in the room, the Earth in its orbit, all frozen. Would you notice? The trick is, if your mind is frozen too, you wouldn't. The universe could be timeless and you'd never know, because knowing requires time. That's the paradox. Maybe the universe never moves and we simply imagine the motion. Our memories give us a sense of flow, but those memories are just part of the frozen structure. Your past experiences don't prove time exists. They only prove that your brain contains the pattern of remembering. Some physicists even argue time itself is emergent, like temperature, which doesn't exist at the level of a single atom but emerges when many atoms interact. Time might be something that arises only when matter and energy form complex systems. The deep universe, the quantum fabric, may be timeless. Time only shows up as a kind of side effect when things get big enough. If that's true, then asking, can the universe exist without time, is like asking, can molecules exist without temperature? The answer is yes, because temperature isn't fundamental. It's a property we invented to describe a pattern. Time might be the same, useful, but not necessary. Now let's push timelessness to the edge of absurdity. If everything already exists, does that mean your entire life is predetermined? Are you just a character trapped in the loaf of bread, unable to change your slice? Here's where philosophy and physics collide. From inside time, we feel like we make choices. Should I order the pizza or the salad? Should I text back or ghost? Those choices feel real. But from the timeless perspective, both outcomes exist. The slice where you chose pizza exists. The slice where you chose salad exists. You don't change the loaf, you just experience one slice. That's both reassuring and terrifying. Free will may not mean altering the loaf. It may just mean being aware of different parts of it. Let's not ignore the humour here. Imagine trying to use timelessness as an excuse. You forget your friend's birthday? Just say, it didn't happen in my slice. You miss a deadline. Technically, all deadlines are illusions. You're late to work. Boss, time doesn't exist, so I'm not actually late. Spoiler, don't try this. Physics might forgive you, but your boss won't. Yet this playful take leads us to a profound point. If time isn't real, then our obsession with it, clocks, schedules, deadlines, aging, might be misplaced. Yes, we need it for practical reasons, but at a deeper level, none of those things define reality. They define our perception of reality. The stress we feel about running out of time may be one of the biggest illusions of all. Another angle, information. Some scientists argue that information is more fundamental than time. Think about it. Time is about change, and change is about information differences. If every possible piece of information already exists in the structure of reality, time is just the way we read it. This brings us to the idea of timeless quantum gravity. a proposed theory where the geometry of space and the distribution of information explain everything, without time being necessary. We might someday describe the universe entirely in terms of relations and structures, with no ticking clock required. And then there's the question of beginnings. If time isn't real, can there even be a beginning? We love to picture the Big Bang as the moment everything started. But in a timeless view, the Big Bang isn't the first event. It's just another slice of the block. No beginning, no end, just structure. This might explain why asking what happened before the Big Bang feels so frustrating. There was no before because there was no time. The block contains the Big Bang and everything after, but not as a story, just as geometry. A universe without time might even explain why mathematics works so well. Math describes relationships, not sequences. 2 + 2 = 4, whether time exists or not. Geometry, algebra, probability, they don't require time. They're timeless truths. Maybe the universe itself is a mathematical object, not something happening, but something existing. Plato would have loved that idea, reality as math frozen in perfection, while we stumble around thinking it's all about clocks. And here's where timelessness might give us comfort. We often fear the passage of time, getting older, losing opportunities, watching moments slip away. But in a timeless universe, nothing slips away. Every laugh, every love, every joy is permanent. You don't lose them. They're carved into the loaf, written in the score, printed on the reel. That doesn't mean we stop feeling loss, but it does mean reality doesn't erase what we value most. Existence is kinder than we think. Let's get bold and ask what it means for reality as a whole. If the universe doesn't need time, what kind of reality are we really living in? And more importantly, what does that make us? Because timelessness isn't just about the cosmos, it's about consciousness. If time doesn't exist, then our minds, our lives, and our sense of self all need re-examination. Let's begin with identity. You usually think of yourself as a continuous being, stretching from your childhood to your old age. Time is the glue that binds those versions of you together. But if time isn't real, then who you are isn't a flowing river. It's a mosaic of still frames, each equally real. The 6-year-old you exists. The present you exists. The 80-year-old you exists. You don't travel from one to another. You simply are all of them. Consciousness makes you feel like you're moving, but timelessness says you're already the complete collection. This is both comforting and unnerving. Comforting because you never really lose the earlier versions of yourself. Unnerving because maybe you're not one person at all. You're an entire block of selves, stitched together only by perception. This opens up a wild possibility. Maybe consciousness is not located in time at all. Instead, it might hop between moments, like a spotlight shining on different slices of reality. That spotlight creates the illusion of flow, but the slices are eternal. This might explain déjà vu. Perhaps the spotlight briefly shines on a slice you've already experienced, giving you the eerie feeling of repetition. It could even explain why dreams feel timeless. Your consciousness is drifting through the structure, without the usual sequence holding it together. Now let's step back and ask, if reality is timeless, what does that mean for causality? Normally we believe A causes B, and then B causes C. Without time, cause and effect don't really apply. Instead, everything exists in relationships. Think of a crossword puzzle. Each word isn't caused by the other. They simply fit together in a pattern. That's how a timeless universe works. Reality is a giant crossword where all the words already exist, and their meaning comes from how they intersect, not from one happening before the other. Cause and effect might just be a shorthand we use inside the puzzle, but from outside, it's just structure. If you're looking for a mental workout, imagine what morality means in a timeless universe. We often base morality on consequences, what happens after we act. But if all actions and consequences already exist, does morality change? Some might say yes. It becomes meaningless since nothing can change. Others might argue the opposite. Every choice is eternal, carved into the block forever. Every act of kindness, every cruelty, permanently etched into reality. That raises the stakes. You're not just making a temporary choice, you're engraving your existence into the cosmic sculpture. Timelessness doesn't make morality disappear, it makes it permanent. Let's take a fun detour. What about time travel movies in a timeless universe? Suddenly, Back to the Future looks different. You're not really changing anything by going to the past, because all states already exist. Marty McFly isn't rewriting history. He's just experiencing another slice that already contains the events of his trip. The Terminator franchise becomes less about preventing doomsday and more about exploring the slices where it already happened. In a sense, every time travel story collapses, because there's no before and after to alter. The block already has all versions. Sorry, Hollywood. Now let's get cosmic again. Black holes provide a fascinating lens on timelessness. Near the event horizon, time as we know it essentially stops for an outside observer. From far away, anything falling into a black hole appears frozen. But for the falling object, time continues normally, at least until it meets its doom. This clash of perspectives might be a clue that time isn't fundamental, but relative, emerging only under certain conditions. Black holes could be nature's way of whispering, time is an illusion. Quantum entanglement also fits here. When two particles are entangled, their states are linked instantly, no matter how far apart they are. From our time-bound view, that looks like faster-than-light communication. But in a timeless framework, there is no communication. It's just structure. The correlation isn't happening in time. It simply exists as part of the block. Entanglement may be bizarre in a temporal view, but in a timeless one, it's perfectly natural. Let's not ignore the elephant in the room. If time isn't real, why do we feel it so strongly? Why do we sense the ticking clock, the aging body, the forward march? The simplest answer is survival. Evolution didn't need us to understand timeless physics. It needed us to predict danger, find food, and reproduce. A brain that perceives time has a huge advantage. It can remember past dangers and anticipate future ones. That illusion helped us survive. Time is like a heads-up display in a video game, useful for navigation, but not the actual code running underneath. That brings us to memory. Without time, memory becomes something strange. Normally, we think of memory as evidence of the past, but in a timeless universe, memory is just part of the structure. Your memory of eating breakfast is not proof that it happened before. It's just the slice you're in. Your memory is a feature of the block, not a window into something that used to be. That means even the sense of past may be a trick built into certain slices of reality. In another slice, you could have different memories entirely. This leads to the idea that maybe we're not just experiencing time, we're generating it. Consciousness might be the mechanism that turns timeless structure into experienced time. Like a film projector, the mind creates motion from still images. If so, then time is not a property of the universe at all. It's a property of consciousness. Without minds to perceive it, the universe would simply be frozen structure. That's a humbling thought. Time exists because you do. Let's add another twist. What about infinity? In a timeless universe, infinity isn't about time going on forever. It's about endless variation. Every configuration of matter and energy exists. That's infinity. Not duration, but plenitude. Think of it like an infinite library, containing every possible book, every possible sentence, every possible word. The library doesn't create books one after another. It already contains them all. That's the universe. Infinity is completeness, not continuation. Here's a lighter example. If every possibility exists timelessly, then somewhere in the block there's a slice where you made every possible choice. You ate the salad, you ate the pizza, you went to the party, you stayed home, you won the lottery, you lost your keys. All those versions of you exist. You're basically starring in an infinite multiverse sitcom, and you don't even need reruns. Somewhere, another version of you is still stuck trying to set up the Wi-Fi. But timelessness isn't just a curiosity. It has real consequences for how we live. If every moment is eternal, then maybe we should value each one more deeply. Instead of racing toward the future or regretting the past, we can recognize that everything we experience is permanent in its own way. Your laughter, your tears, your struggles, they're not fleeting. They're written into the cosmic block, forever real. That doesn't mean we stop striving. It just means we can let go of the fear of losing what matters. Nothing is lost. This perspective also reframes death. Normally, we think of death as the end of our time, but in a timeless universe, there is no end. The version of you who lived continues to exist as much as the version of you who dies. Death doesn't erase life, it just adds another slice. This doesn't necessarily solve the mystery of what happens to consciousness, but it does soften the blow. Existence doesn't delete you. You're already part of the structure permanently. We've journeyed a long way through timelessness, and by now you might be thinking, okay, I get the physics, I get the philosophy, I get the bread loaf and the movie reel. But what does all this actually mean for me? Sitting here, alive, moving through what sure feels like time. That's the real heart of the question, because even if the universe doesn't need time, we seem to. Our lives, our choices, our experiences, they all depend on the sense that there's a past, a present, and a future. Without that, the world would feel alien. So how do we reconcile the timeless universe with our time-bound existence? Let's start with the obvious. Even if time is an illusion, it's a very convincing one. We rely on it to function. You wake up, you eat breakfast, you head to work, you binge a show, you go to bed. Your body ages, your memories accumulate, your plans stretch ahead. Illusion or not, time structures your life. And illusions can be powerful. Just like colour doesn't exist outside the brain but still shapes our world, time may not exist fundamentally but still organises our experience. The fact that it's emergent doesn't make it irrelevant. It makes it extraordinary. Now think about meaning. If time isn't real, does that make life meaningless? Not at all. In fact, it may make it richer. Imagine if every moment you've ever lived is not slipping away, but forever etched into reality. Your first kiss, your biggest triumph, your deepest heartbreak, none of it is lost. Those slices are permanent. You don't have to cling desperately to them or mourn their passing, because in a timeless sense, they never pass. That can change the way you value life. Instead of racing against the clock, you can savor each slice, knowing it's eternal. Let's play with humor for a second. Imagine running late and saying, "Relax, time doesn't exist." Or explaining to your dentist, "I didn't miss my appointment, I just arrived in a different slice." Of course, that won't hold up in court or at the office, but it highlights something important. We may be trapped in the illusion of time, but we're also free to see through it. And seeing through it can lighten the pressure we feel about aging, deadlines, and regrets. After all, if every version of you exists timelessly, then missing the bus isn't exactly a cosmic tragedy. Somewhere in the loaf, you caught it. But let's get more serious. One of the hardest things we face is loss. Losing loved ones, losing moments, losing opportunities. In a world without time, nothing is lost. Every laugh you shared, every hug, every conversation, they all exist permanently. You can't reach them again, but they're not gone. They're part of the eternal block. That doesn't erase grief, but it offers comfort. It suggests that existence is far less fragile than we think. Death doesn't undo life. It simply joins it in the sculpture of reality. This also reframes hope. Normally we think of hope as waiting for a better future. But if the future already exists, then hope is not about waiting. It's about trusting that slice of the universe is as real as the one you're in now. Your dreams, your goals, your visions aren't the potential. They're already part of the structure. Whether your consciousness experiences them or not, they exist. That can make hope feel less like a gamble and more like a recognition. Somewhere, the better life you imagine is as real as this one. And what about love? Love is often described as timeless, but maybe that's literally true. The moments you share with others don't vanish. They're carved into existence forever. Love doesn't just endure in memory, it endures in reality. That may be why love feels eternal, even when people are gone. Because it is. Now let's ask the question no one wants to face. If time isn't real, does change even exist? Aren't we just stuck in a static block? The answer is subtle. From the outside, there is no change, just structure. But from the inside, consciousness gives us the flow. Change is how we experience the block. It's not that change is fake, it's just perspectival. Like watching a flip book, the images don't move, but your experience of them creates the motion. Change is real to us because we are the motion, even if the universe itself is frozen. This perspective also reshapes spirituality. Many traditions speak of eternity, not as endless time, but as timelessness. Heaven, nirvana, enlightenment, often described as states beyond time. Science and spirituality might be circling the same idea from different sides. Physics talks about block universes. Mystics talk about eternity. Both hint at the same possibility. Reality transcends the ticking of clocks. Let's not forget the cosmic irony. We invented clocks to measure something that might not even exist. Sundials, pendulums, atomic clocks, all to pin down a phantom. Yet those phantoms run our lives. We live by alarms, calendars, countdowns. Maybe part of wisdom is realizing that the most powerful force shaping our days is an illusion. That doesn't mean we can ignore it, but it does mean we can smile at it. The universe isn't bound by time. We are only bound by our belief in it. So where does this leave us? The question we started with was whether the universe can exist without time, and the answer, after exploring physics, philosophy, and metaphors, is yes. The universe doesn't need time. Time may be our invention, our survival mechanism, our narrative. The cosmos itself may be timeless structure, eternal and unchanging. That's staggering, but also liberating. It means nothing is ever lost. It means every moment is permanent. It means reality is not a river flowing away from us, but a vast sculpture we move through. And maybe, just maybe, it means our obsession with running out of time is misplaced. You can't run out of something that isn't real. What matters isn't how much time you have. It's how deeply you live the slices you're given. And as we close this exploration, let's circle back to where we began. Here, in this quiet corner of the night, in sleep space. You came here seeking rest, maybe curiosity, maybe wonder, and perhaps now, as you drift toward dreams, you can take comfort in the thought that nothing ever really vanishes. Every dream you've had, every night of rest, every tomorrow waiting to arrive, they're all part of the eternal block. Sleep itself is timeless. So close your eyes, let go of the ticking clock, and sink into the mystery of a universe that doesn't need time at all.